was quiet. Faith Anderson's eyes opened at exactly 5 in the morning. No alarm. 34 years in the United States Army had turned her body into its own clock. She sat up, swung her legs off the bed, and pressed her bare feet into the cold hardwood floor. The house near Fort Belvoir was still dark. She liked it that way. Silence was a luxury she rarely got.
She made her bed first. Hospital corners, sheets pulled tight enough to bounce a quarter. Some habits never die, they just become who you are. In the kitchen, coffee brewed black in a steel French press, no sugar, no cream. She poured it into a plain white mug and stood by the window, watching the first gray light crawl across the Virginia sky.
On the wall behind her hung a framed photograph. A young black man in army dress blues, standing tall, chin up, eyes full of something that looked like pride and pain at the same time. Her father, Private First Class William Anderson, Korean War. He never made it past sergeant, but he made sure his daughter knew she could make it past anything. Today was her mother's 82nd birthday. Faith hadn't taken personal leave in 2 years. 2 years of briefings, deployments, congressional hearings, and phone calls at 3 in the morning. 2 years of being Lieutenant General Anderson. 3 stars, 34 years of service, one of the highest-ranking black women in the history of the United States Army. Today she didn't want any of that. She wanted to be Faith. Just Faith. A daughter driving to see her mama. That's why she picked the linen blouse. Khaki pants, simple gold earrings her mother gave her 20 years ago. No insignia, no uniform, no rank visible anywhere on her body. She grabbed her keys and walked to the garage. The Mercedes AMG S-Class sat there like a sleeping panther. Midnight black, leather interior the color of dark honey. She bought it the week she got her 3rd star. Paid in full. No loan, no payment plan. 40 months of combat pay she never spent because there was nothing to buy in a war zone. That car was the one thing she owned that was just for her. She turned the engine over. The V8 hummed low, barely a whisper. She connected her phone. Gospel music filled the cabin. Mahalia Jackson, her mother's favorite. The route from Fort Belvoir to her mother's place in the Shenandoah Valley was about 2 hours if the traffic was kind. Mostly highway, then a long stretch of 2-lane road through Ridgemont County. Ridgemont County. If you blinked, you'd miss it. Rolling green hills. Farmland stretching out flat in every direction.
A single gas station with a hand-painted sign and a Confederate flag bumper sticker on the cashier's truck. Quiet place. The kind of quiet that could fool you into thinking nothing bad ever happened here. But things had happened.
3 complaints filed with the Department of Justice in the last 5 years. All about the same thing. Racial profiling during traffic stops. Black and Latino drivers pulled over at rates that didn't match the population. Every complaint was investigated internally. Every single one was dismissed. Nobody outside the county paid attention. Nobody had a reason to. Yet, 10 miles down that same 2-lane road, a Ridgemont County Sheriff's cruiser sat parked behind a billboard. Engine idling. Radar gun pointed at nothing in particular. Behind the wheel was Sergeant Derek Lawson, 45 years old. Mirrored sunglasses. A lip packed with chewing tobacco. 17 years on the force. Passed over for promotion twice. Once for a younger deputy. Once for a black officer who transferred in from Richmond. He never got over either one. Lawson wasn't a man who screamed or threw things. He was worse than that. He was a man who believed, deeply, quietly, completely, that certain people didn't belong in certain places. And when he saw them there, he considered it his personal duty to correct the situation. In the passenger seat sat Deputy Kyle Brennan, 26 years old, 6 months on the job.
still had the smell of the academy on him. He kept his hands in his lap and his mouth shut, because that's what rookies did when they rode with Lawson. Then the Mercedes passed them. Lawson lowered his sunglasses, watched it glide by like black silk on asphalt. He picked up the radio. The Mercedes pulled over smooth and easy. No hesitation, no panic. Faith had seen the lights in her rear view and done exactly what she'd been taught. What every black parent in America teaches their children before they ever hand them a set of car keys. Signal. Slow down. Pull to the right. Both hands on the wheel. Engine off. Window down. No sudden movements.
She'd given that same talk to her nieces and nephews. She'd given a version of it to young black soldiers under her command. And now, at 57 years old, with 3 stars she earned in combat zones on 2 continents, she was doing it herself on the side of a highway in rural Virginia. The gravel popped under Lawson's boots as he walked toward her door. Slow, heavy steps. The kind of walk that said, "I own this road and everything on it." He leaned into the window. The smell hit her first. Tobacco and coffee and something sour underneath. His sunglasses reflected her own face back at her. "License and registration." No greeting, no explanation, no, "Ma'am, do you know why I pulled you over?" Just the demand, flat and hard like a slap on a table. Faith reached for her purse on the passenger seat. Slowly. She pulled out her wallet, slid out her driver's license, and handed it over along with the registration from the glove compartment. "Here you go, officer." Lawson took both documents, held them between 2 fingers like they were contaminated. He looked at the license. Faith Anderson, Fort Belvoir address. He said her name the way you'd read a word you didn't believe, like the letters themselves were lying. "That's correct." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he looked at the car. The leather seats, the walnut trim on the dashboard, the navigation screen glowing soft blue. "Nice car." "Thank you." "Real nice car." She didn't respond. She knew what was coming. She'd heard this melody before. Different officers, different highways, same song. Lawson walked back to his cruiser. Through her side mirror, Faith watched him slide into the driver's seat and pick up his radio. Brennan sat beside him, staring at the laptop mounted on the dash. Inside the cruiser, the computer screen glowed green. No warrants. No flags. No stolen vehicle report. Registration matched the name. Insurance active. Record completely clean. Brennan looked at the screen, then at Lawson. "She's clean, Sarge. Not even a parking ticket. We should let her go." Lawson didn't answer. He spit tobacco juice into a cup and stared at the Mercedes through the windshield. "Run it again." "I just ran it. There's nothing—" "I said run it again."
Brennan ran it again. Same result. Clean. Every line, every field, every database. Clean. Lawson opened his door and walked back to the Mercedes. This time his stride was different, tighter, like a man who'd already made a decision and was just walking toward it. He leaned into the window again. Closer this time. Close enough that Faith could see the veins in his eyes. "Where you headed?" "I'm visiting my mother. It's her birthday." "That's so. Where's Mama live?" "Elkton. About 40 minutes from here." Elkton. He said it like he was chewing on it. "Long drive in a car like this just to see Mama. That's a $150,000 vehicle you're sitting in. You mind telling me how you came by it?"
There it was. The question underneath the question. The one that had nothing to do with traffic enforcement and everything to do with the color of her skin. Faith kept her hands on the wheel. 10 and 2. Steady. "I purchased it, officer. Is there something wrong with my registration?" "I'm just making conversation." "With respect, I'd like to continue on my way."
Lawson straightened up, took off his sunglasses. His eyes were pale blue, and there was nothing behind them that looked like reason. "Step out of the vehicle." "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Step out." "Officer, you have my license. You have my registration. I haven't committed any violation. On what legal basis are you asking me to exit my vehicle?
Something shifted in Lawson's face. A muscle twitched near his jaw.
He wasn't used to being questioned. Not out here. Not on his road. And definitely not by a black woman who looked him in the eye when she spoke. I'm not going to ask again. Faith held his gaze for 3 full seconds. Then she unbuckled her seatbelt, opened the door, and stepped onto the gravel shoulder. The July heat hit her like a wall, humidity so thick you could feel it settle on your skin like a wet cloth.
Lawson looked her up and down.
Linen blouse, khaki pants, gold earrings, flat shoes. Nothing about her screamed threat. Nothing about her screamed criminal. But he'd already written the story in his head, and no amount of clean records was going to rewrite it. Turn around. Hands on the vehicle. I am cooperating fully. I would like your badge number, please. You don't get to ask me questions.
He keyed his radio. Dispatch, this is Unit 7-4. I got an uncooperative driver on Route 33, mile marker 12, requesting backup. Uncooperative. That word, that one single word, would matter later. Because the dash cam was rolling, and that word was a lie. Faith stood with her palms flat on the roof of her Mercedes. The metal was hot enough to sting. She could feel her pulse in her fingertips, but her breathing stayed even. 4 counts in, 4 counts out. The same breathing she used when mortars landed close enough to rattle her teeth in Kandahar.
Within 6 minutes, 2 more cruisers arrived. Doors opened, boots on gravel, 3 officers now, plus Lawson, 4 armed men surrounding 1 unarmed woman on the side of a 2-lane road with no witnesses except God and a dash cam. Actually, there was one more. A white couple in a silver pickup truck had pulled into the gas station 100 yards up the road. The woman in the passenger seat saw the lights, saw the officers, saw the black woman standing with her hands on a car that cost more than most people's homes. She pulled out her phone and hit record. She didn't get out of the truck, didn't say a word, but she kept that phone steady. Lawson turned to one of the backup deputies. I want to search the vehicle. He walked back to Faith.
Ma'am, I'm going to need your consent to search this car.
Faith knew the law. She knew it better than he did. She knew it better than most lawyers. She had sat in Pentagon briefings where the Fourth Amendment was discussed in the context of military operations on foreign soil. She was not about to let it be violated on her own. I do not consent to a search. If you got nothing to hide, you shouldn't have a problem. I have nothing to hide, and I do not consent.
Lawson's nostrils flared. He stepped back and keyed his radio again.
Dispatch, requesting K-9 unit to Route 33, mile marker 12. Possible narcotics. Possible narcotics. Another lie. Another word that the camera caught. Faith stayed still. The sun pressed down on the back of her neck. Sweat rolled along her spine. The gospel music was still playing from inside the car. Faint now, barely a whisper through the open window. Mahalia Jackson, singing about trouble and grace.
Meanwhile, 10 minutes behind her on the same highway, a black Chevrolet Suburban with United States government plates was closing the distance. Behind the wheel was Colonel Denise Whitfield, Faith's aide-de-camp. Whitfield had seen the flashing lights from half a mile away. She slowed down, pulled to the opposite shoulder, and the moment she recognized the midnight black Mercedes, her stomach dropped. She picked up her phone and dialed the Fort Belvoir Military Police duty desk.
This is Colonel Whitfield. I need to report a situation involving Lieutenant General Anderson. I need the Provost Marshal on the line. Right now. The line clicked. Hold music played for 3 seconds. Then a voice answered. Back on Route 33, Faith Anderson stood perfectly still under the Virginia sun, hands flat on her own car, surrounded by 4 men who saw nothing when they looked at her. Nothing except a black woman who didn't belong. The K-9 unit arrived 11 minutes later, a tan SUV with a sheriff's department decal on the side. The handler, a stocky deputy with a buzz cut and wraparound sunglasses, stepped out and opened the rear hatch. A German shepherd jumped down, nose already working the air. Faith watched from the shoulder. Hands still visible, spine still straight. She said nothing. The dog circled the Mercedes, started at the front bumper, moved along the driver's side, around the trunk, up the passenger side, nose low, tail level, breathing in short, sharp bursts that sounded like a metronome ticking against the silence. The dog did not sit, did not alert, did not bark, did not paw at any panel, any seam, any door. Nothing. The handler looked at Lawson and shook his head slightly. The kind of shake that says, "It's clean, let it go." Lawson didn't let it go.
Run him again.
Sarge, he already... Again! The handler walked the dog around the Mercedes a second time. Same route, same pace, same result. The German shepherd circled the entire car and came back to sit at his handler's feet, tongue out, panting in the heat. Not a single alert. Lawson stepped forward and pointed at the trunk. He signaled, "Right there, I saw it." The handler frowned. "That wasn't a signal. He was just, I saw what I saw. Open the trunk."
The handler looked at the ground. Then he looked at Brennan. Then he looked away. Nobody said a word.
Lawson walked to the Mercedes, reached inside, and popped the trunk release.
The trunk opened with a soft click.
Inside, neatly arranged, a garment bag, long black, zipped shut. A gift bag with tissue paper, pink and yellow, the kind you get at a nice store. A leather Bible with a cracked spine, a photo album with a floral cover, and a small cooler with a homemade pound cake inside, wrapped in foil. A daughter's things, a birthday visit packed with love and care. Lawson didn't see any of that.
He pulled the gift bag out and dropped it on the asphalt. Tissue paper scattered in the breeze.
He opened the cooler, poked at the foil, tossed it back. He flipped through the photo album with his bare hands, no gloves, leaving smudges on pages full of family memories. The garment bag he shoved aside without opening, just pushed it to the back of the trunk like it was in his way.
If he had unzipped it, just pulled that zipper down 6 inches, he would have seen the dark blue fabric, the gold buttons, the ribbons, the 3 silver stars on each epaulette. But he didn't, because he wasn't looking for evidence. He was looking for confirmation, and those are 2 very different things. Faith watched him scatter her mother's birthday across the side of a highway. She watched the tissue paper tumble into the gravel. She watched him handle her father's Bible like it was a piece of trash. Her voice came out low, controlled, but there was iron underneath it. "I want your badge number. I want your name. And I want your supervisor's contact information." Lawson slammed the trunk shut. "You don't get to make demands. I have the right to—" "You have the right to shut your mouth."
He stepped toward her. Close. Too close. She could feel the heat off his body and the tobacco on his breath. "You think you're smart? You think because you got a nice car and a nice little attitude you can tell me how to do my job?" Faith didn't step back. She held her ground, the way she'd held ground when incoming fire shook the walls of a forward operating base in Helmand Province. She looked him dead in the eyes.
"I am requesting your badge number. That is my legal right." "Your rights are whatever I say they are out here."
She reached toward her pocket, slowly, deliberately, going for her phone. That was all it took. Lawson grabbed her wrist, hard, the kind of grip that leaves bruises shaped like fingers. He twisted her arm behind her back and slammed her forward into the hood of the Mercedes.
The metal seared through her blouse. July's sun had been baking that hood for 20 minutes. She felt it burn across her collarbone, her forearms, the side of her face. "That's resisting! You hear me? Resisting a lawful order!"
She wasn't resisting. The dash cam saw it. The body cam saw it. The woman in the silver pickup truck 100 yards away. Her phone saw it too. Handcuffs clicked around her left wrist, then her right. Tight, too tight. The metal bit into skin and pressed against bone. Lawson pulled her off the hood and pushed her toward his cruiser. She stumbled on the gravel but didn't fall. She caught herself, straightened up, walked the rest of the way on her own 2 feet. He opened the rear door and put his hand on her head, pressing down, hard, as he guided her into the back seat. The door slammed shut.
The back of a sheriff's cruiser is a small space.
Hard plastic seats, a cage of metal mesh between you and the front. No handles on the inside of the doors. The air smelled like sweat and vinyl cleaner and something else. Something like fear baked into the upholstery by everyone who'd sat there before. The air conditioning was off.
It was 95 degrees outside. Inside that car, it was worse. The heat wrapped around her like a fist. Sweat started at her temples and rolled down the sides of her face.
Lawson left her there. He walked back to his cruiser, leaned against the fender, and started filling out paperwork. Took his time. Made a phone call. Laughed at something. Spit tobacco into the dirt. 5 minutes became 10. 10 became 20. 20 became 30.
Faith sat in that oven and breathed. 4 counts in, hold, 4 counts out. The same rhythm she used the night a Black Hawk went down outside Kabul, and she had to coordinate the rescue from a bunker with no power and no comms for 45 minutes. She had waited in worse places than this. She had survived worse men than him. But that didn't mean this didn't hurt. The gospel music had stopped. The Mercedes sat empty on the shoulder, trunk still closed, gift bags still on the ground, tissue paper stuck in the gravel like small pink and yellow flags marking the scene of something wrong. 40 minutes. He left her in there for 40 minutes. While Lawson leaned against his cruiser doing nothing, Deputy Kyle Brennan stood off to the side. He hadn't said much since the backup arrived. He was the youngest man on the scene by a decade, and he knew it. But something was eating at him. He'd watched Lawson pull over a woman with a clean record. He'd watched him fabricate a canine alert. He'd watched him dump her belongings on the road. He'd watched him slam a cooperative civilian into a burning hood and cuff her for reaching toward her own pocket. And he hadn't said a damn word. That silence was going to stay with him for a long time. But right now, he could do one small thing. He walked to Lawson's cruiser. Casual, like he was checking something. He glanced through the rear window and saw Faith sitting upright, sweat soaking through her blouse, eyes straight ahead. Not crying, not screaming, just sitting there, with a stillness that made him feel ashamed of every man on that highway. He reached for the window control and cracked it 2 inches. Just enough to let a thin line of air slip through. Then he walked back to his own cruiser. He sat in the driver's seat, and he did one more thing. He pressed the button on his body cam, held it for 3 seconds until the green light blinked. Recording confirmed. Not because anyone told him to, not because it was protocol, but because somewhere underneath the uniform and the silence and the fear of speaking up, Kyle Brennan still knew the difference between right and wrong. He just wasn't brave enough to say it out loud. Not yet. Oh, hell no. Nah. 40 minutes in a hot car with no AC. For what? For driving a nice car while black? Close your eyes for a second. Imagine that's you. Imagine that's your mother. Now tell me you're not furious.
The black Chevrolet Suburban came around the bend doing exactly the speed limit. Government plates. Tinted windows. The kind of vehicle that doesn't get pulled over. Not even in Ridgemont County.
Colonel Denise Whitfield had been driving 10 minutes behind Faith all morning. That was the arrangement. Faith wanted a quiet drive alone. Whitfield respected that. But she stayed close enough, because that's what an aide-de-camp does for a 3-star general, even on personal leave.
When she saw the blue lights from half a mile out, her chest tightened. When she recognized the midnight black Mercedes on the shoulder, surrounded by 4 cruisers, her blood went cold. She pulled the Suburban onto the opposite shoulder, killed the engine, grabbed her Department of Defense credential from the center console, and picked up her phone. The provost marshal at Fort Belvoir was already on the line. She'd called 12 minutes ago. He'd been listening to everything since.
Colonel, I have state police standing by. Say the word.
Stand by. I'm approaching now. Whitfield stepped out of the Suburban. She was in civilian clothes, navy blazer, gray slacks, but everything about the way she moved said military. Shoulders square, chin level, steps measured and deliberate. The kind of walk that clears a path without asking. She crossed the highway. Lawson saw her coming and straightened up from the fender of his cruiser. He put one hand on his belt.
Ma'am, this is an active traffic stop. I need you to step back. Whitfield didn't step back. She held up her credential, a laminated Department of Defense ID with a gold seal and a photo that matched her face exactly. Sergeant, my name is Colonel Denise Whitfield, United States Army. I am the aide-de-camp to the woman you currently have handcuffed in the back of your vehicle.
Lawson blinked. His mouth opened, but nothing came out for a full 2 seconds.
I don't care who you are. This is county jurisdiction, and the woman in your car is Lieutenant General Faith Anderson, 3-star general, United States Army, 34 years of service. She holds a security clearance higher than anyone in this county has ever seen. And right now, she's sitting in your backseat in 95-degree heat with no air conditioning.
Whitfield's voice never rose. It didn't need to. Every word landed like a hammer on glass.
You need to release her. Immediately.
Lawson's jaw tightened. He looked at Brennan. Brennan looked at the ground. He looked at the backup deputies. They were already stepping back toward their cruisers. Nobody wanted to be standing next to Lawson when this thing landed. She didn't say anything about being military.
She didn't have to. She gave you her license. She gave you her registration. She cooperated fully. You had no probable cause. You fabricated a canine alert, and every second of this has been recorded by your dash cam, by your body cam, and by at least one civilian witness. Whitfield pointed toward the Mercedes. Now, open the trunk. Lawson didn't move, so Whitfield walked to the car herself. She reached into the trunk and pulled the garment bag forward, the one Lawson had shoved aside like it was nothing. She laid it across the trunk lid and pulled the zipper down. The fabric unfolded in the afternoon light.
Dark blue dress uniform, gold buttons running down the front, rows of ribbons on the left chest, a bronze star, a Legion of Merit, a Distinguished Service Medal, and more. Service stripes climbing the sleeve like rungs on a ladder, and on each shoulder 3 silver stars catching the sun. 3 stars. The backup deputies froze. The canine handler took 2 steps back. Brennan closed his eyes and exhaled through his nose like a man who'd been holding his breath for an hour.
Lawson stared at the uniform. The color drained from his face, starting at his forehead and sliding down like someone pulled a plug. I was just following procedure. I didn't
open the car, now. He fumbled for his keys, dropped them, picked them up. His hands were shaking. He unlocked the rear door of his cruiser and pulled it open. Faith stepped out.
Her blouse was soaked through. The skin on her forearms was pink where the hood had burned her. Red marks circled both wrists where the cuffs had bitten in. Her hair was damp and pressed against her temples. But she stood straight, shoulders back, chin up. The same posture she held when she took her 3rd star
in front of the Secretary of the Army and a room full of generals. Whitfield moved to uncuff her. Faith held out her wrists. The metal clicked open and fell away.
She rubbed her wrists.
Slowly. Then she straightened her blouse, smoothed it with both hands, adjusted her earrings, every movement calm, controlled, unhurried. Then she looked at Lawson. She didn't yell, didn't curse, didn't threaten. She just looked at him, and when she spoke, her voice was low enough that he had to lean in to hear it.
I have commanded 40,000 soldiers. I have served in Iraq and Afghanistan. I have buried friends who gave their lives for this country. And this, right here, on the side of this road, is the most disrespected I have ever been on American soil. Lawson opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The radio crackled. Dispatch. The voice was clipped and urgent. Unit 7-4, stand down immediately. Report to the station. Do not engage further. Acknowledge. Lawson reached for the radio. His hand was still trembling. 7-4, acknowledged. The drive back to the station took Lawson 14 minutes. 14 minutes of silence. No radio chatter, no tobacco, just the hum of the engine and the sound of a career collapsing in real time inside his own head. When he pulled into the parking lot, Sheriff Harold Givens was already standing at the front door, arms crossed, phone still in his hand. His face looked like a man who'd just swallowed a wasp and was trying to decide who to spit it at. Givens had gotten 3 phone calls in the span of 12 minutes. The first was from the Fort Belvoir Provost Marshal. The second was from the Virginia State Police Superintendent. The third, the one that made his left eye twitch, was from the governor's office. The governor's office, for a traffic stop in Ridgemont County. That had never happened before. That was never supposed to happen. Lawson walked through the front door, and Givens was on him before he made it past the reception desk. Badge, weapon, now. Sheriff, if you just let me explain. There's nothing to explain. I've already seen the dashcam footage. Badge and weapon on my desk. You're suspended without pay, effective immediately. Lawson's face twisted. That look, the one that sat somewhere between disbelief and outrage, like a man who genuinely could not understand why the world was turning on him for doing what he'd always done. I was doing my job. Your job? You cuffed a 3-star general and left her in a hot car for 40 minutes. You fabricated a canine alert. You conducted an illegal search. And you did all of it on camera. That's not a job. That's a federal lawsuit with my name on it. Lawson unholstered his weapon, set it on the desk, unclipped his badge, and placed it next to the gun. His fingers lingered on the metal for a moment, like he was saying goodbye to something he thought would always be his. He turned to Brennan, who had followed him inside and was standing near the water cooler, with his arms folded tight against his chest. Kyle, come on, you were there. Tell him I was just being thorough. Brennan looked at Lawson, really looked at him, maybe for the first time. I told you to let her go, Sarge, before backup, before the dog. I told you she was clean, and you should let her go. Lawson's mouth opened, then closed. He looked around the room like he was searching for someone, anyone who would stand with him. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Givens pointed to the door. Go home. Don't talk to the press. Don't talk to anyone. You'll hear from the county attorney. Lawson walked out. The door swung shut behind him with a sound that was too soft for how final it was. Meanwhile, the footage was already loose. The bystander, the woman in the silver pickup truck, had uploaded her phone video to Facebook at 2:47 p.m. By 4 p.m., a local news station in Charlottesville had picked it up. By 6 p.m., it was on Twitter. By 9 p.m., it was everywhere. The video was shaky. The audio was thin. You couldn't hear every word, but you could see enough. You could see a black woman standing with her hands up. You could see a deputy slam her into a car hood. You could see handcuffs go on. and you could see her sit in the back of a cruiser for the better part of an hour in the dead of summer. 12 hours after the upload, the video had 2 million views. The hashtag started simple. Hashtag Faith Anderson. Then it evolved. Hashtag General Anderson. Hashtag Driving While Black. Hashtag Ridgemont County.
By the next morning, every major network had the story. CNN, MSNBC, Fox, all of them running the same grainy footage next to a Department of Defense photo of Lieutenant General Faith Anderson in full dress uniform, 3 stars, Bronze Star ribbon, the face of a woman who had served her country for 34 years and been treated like a criminal on her way to her mother's birthday party. Sheriff Givens held a press conference at noon. He stood behind a wooden podium with the county seal and called the incident an isolated event that does not reflect the values of the Ridgemont County Sheriff's Office. But the reporters weren't buying it. One of them, a young woman from the Richmond Times-Dispatch, raised her hand.
Sheriff, the Department of Justice has received 3 racial profiling complaints against your department in the last 5 years. All were investigated internally and dismissed. Do you still consider this isolated? Givens blinked. Twice. Then he said, "No further questions," and walked off the stage. That same afternoon, attorney Elaine Crawford held her own press conference. Standing next to Colonel Whitfield, she announced a federal civil rights lawsuit against Sergeant Derek Lawson, the Ridgemont County Sheriff's Office, and the county government. "This was not a traffic stop," Crawford said. "This was racial profiling carried out under the color of law, and we intend to prove it." 3 weeks after the video went viral, the Department of Justice opened a formal investigation, not just into Lawson, into the entire Ridgemont County Sheriff's Office. A team of federal investigators arrived on a Monday morning in 2 unmarked sedans. They carried boxes of subpoenas and laptops loaded with data requests. They set up in the county courthouse, a brick building with peeling paint and a flagpole out front that hadn't been straightened in years. They started with the numbers. Over the past 24 months, Sergeant Derek Lawson had initiated 312 traffic stops. Of those, 256, 82%, involved Black or Latino drivers. Ridgemont County's non-white population was 14%. 14% of the people. 82% of the stops. The math didn't just look bad. It screamed. But Lawson wasn't alone. The investigators pulled records from every deputy in the department. They found a pattern, not as extreme as Lawson's, but deep enough to stain. Black drivers in Ridgemont County were 4 times more likely to be searched during a traffic stop than white drivers. They were 3 times more likely to be asked to step out of their vehicle, and they were 5 times more likely to have force used against them. None of this had ever been audited. None of it had ever been questioned, because the people doing the stopping were the same people reviewing the complaints. The DOJ report landed 6 weeks later, 43 pages. The language was dry and bureaucratic the way federal documents always are. But underneath the jargon, the conclusion was simple. The Ridgemont County Sheriff's Office had engaged in a pattern and practice of racially discriminatory policing in violation of the 14th Amendment. Sheriff Harold Givens was named 14 times in the report, not for pulling anyone over himself, but for building a department where men like Lawson could operate without oversight, without accountability, and without consequence. Until now. The criminal charges came next. A federal grand jury indicted Sergeant Derek Lawson on 3 counts. Deprivation of civil rights under color of law, 18 U.S.C. Section 242, unlawful arrest, and fabrication of evidence, Specifically, the false canine alert he used to justify searching Faith Anderson's vehicle. The trial began on a Tuesday in October. Federal courthouse in Charlottesville. The courtroom smelled like old wood and floor polish. Every seat was taken. Press in the back 2 rows. Community members in the middle. Faith's family on the left side. Her mother, 82 years old, sitting in the front row in a lavender dress with her hands folded in her lap.
Lawson sat at the defense table in a gray suit that didn't quite fit. His attorney, a court-appointed lawyer from Staunton, shuffled papers and avoided eye contact with the gallery. Lawson kept tugging at his collar like it was choking him. The prosecution's case was built on what machines don't forget.
First, the dashcam footage. 12 minutes of video showing the full stop, from the moment Lawson pulled behind the Mercedes to the moment he radioed dispatch calling Faith uncooperative. The jury watched it in silence. 12 faces, some leaning forward, some with their hands over their mouths. Then, the body cam footage from Brennan's camera. A different angle. This one caught the moment Lawson slammed Faith into the hood. You could hear the sound her body made against the metal. A dull, heavy thud that made 2 jurors flinch. Then, the canine handler's testimony. He sat on the stand, hands gripping the armrests, and confirmed under oath that the dog never alerted. Not once. Not on the first pass, not on the second. He said Lawson told him the dog signaled. He said he knew it wasn't true. And he said he didn't speak up because Lawson outranked him. Then the bystander's phone video. Shaky, grainy, but clear enough to show a black woman with her hands raised being forced onto the hood of her own car by a man with a badge. And then Faith took the stand. She wore her full dress uniform, dark blue jacket, gold buttons, ribbons running 4 rows deep across her chest, 3 silver stars on each shoulder. The courtroom went quiet. Not the kind of quiet where people stop talking, the kind where people stop breathing. She told her story the way she'd given military briefings, clear, precise, no wasted words. She described the stop, the questions about her car, the demand to step out, the illegal search, the moment he grabbed her wrist, the heat of the hood through her blouse, the 40 minutes in the back of the cruiser with no air conditioning. Her voice never cracked, her hands never shook. But when the prosecutor asked her how the experience made her feel, she paused for the first time. I have served this country for 34 years. I have been deployed to combat zones. I have had rockets land close enough to feel the heat on my face. And none of it, made me feel as small as I felt on the side of that road. The prosecutor then played the audio. The clip from Lawson's own dash cam. His voice, clear as glass. A black woman driving a Benz like that? Pull her over. And then, seconds later, dogs don't talk back. The courtroom went silent. The judge looked down at her notes. 2 jurors in the back row shook their heads slowly. The defense tried. Lawson's attorney argued he was following standard procedure, that the stop was routine, that there was no racial motivation. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and 16 minutes. Guilty. All 3 counts. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. 36 months in federal prison. Permanent ban from law enforcement anywhere in the United States. And a restitution order that would follow him for the rest of his working life. Lawson stood when the judge read the sentence. His face was blank, empty, like a man watching his own house burn from across the street. But the consequences didn't stop with him. Sheriff Harold Givens resigned 3 days after the verdict. He didn't hold a press conference, didn't make a statement, just turned in his badge, cleaned out his office, and drove away in his pickup truck at 6 a.m. before the cameras arrived. 3 other deputies were suspended pending their own investigations. The canine handler was placed on administrative leave. Internal affairs, real internal affairs, run by outside investigators, opened 11 additional cases. Ridgemont County entered a federal consent decree. The terms were non-negotiable. Mandatory bias training for every officer, body cam activation required on every stop without exception, a civilian oversight board with the power to review complaints and recommend terminations, and Deputy Kyle Brennan, the rookie who cracked the window and made sure the camera was rolling, was promoted to training officer. His first assignment? Designing the department's new de-escalation protocol.
He accepted the position on one condition: that every new recruit watch the dash cam footage from July 14th, the full, unedited 12 minutes, before they ever put on a badge. Faith made it to her mother's birthday. Late. Hours late, with red marks still circling her wrists and the smell of hot vinyl still clinging to her clothes. But she made it.
The house was small. White shutters, a porch with 2 rocking chairs,
And a pot of geraniums that had been there since Faith was 9 years old. The screen door creaked when she pushed it open. Same creak, same pitch, same sound it made every summer of her childhood. Her mother was in the kitchen. The smell hit Faith before anything else. Brown sugar, vanilla, butter, and the warm breath of an oven that had been running all afternoon. Pound cake. Her mother's recipe. The same one Faith had tried to bring in a foil-wrapped cooler that was now sitting in an evidence room somewhere in Ridgemont County. Her mother turned around, saw her daughter's face, didn't ask a single question, just opened her arms.
Faith walked into that hug like a soldier walking through the gates after a long deployment. She pressed her face into her mother's shoulder and breathed. Not 4 counts in, 4 counts out. Not controlled. Not measured. Just breathed. The way you breathe when you finally stop holding everything together.
They stood like that for a long time. The cake cooled on the counter. The evening light turned gold through the kitchen window. And for the first time in 12 hours, Faith Anderson felt safe.
She stayed for 3 days.
They ate cake, watched old movies, sat on the porch and listened to the cicadas. Faith didn't talk about what happened until the second night, and when she did, her mother just nodded and said, "Baby, your daddy went through the same thing. And his daddy before him. The uniform changes. The road doesn't." 6 months later, Faith established the Anderson Foundation.
Its mission was simple: provide free legal representation to people who experienced racially motivated traffic stops but didn't have 3 stars or a Department of Defense credential to protect them. The people who got pulled over on the same roads, asked the same questions, treated the same way, but whose stories never made the news. The foundation launched with a single office in Richmond and a staff of 4. Within a year, it had handled over 200 cases across Virginia, Maryland, and North Carolina, exposed patterns in 12 different departments, helped pass a state-level bill requiring independent review of all use of force incidents during traffic stops. Faith was invited to testify before Congress. She sat in front of a long wooden table in a hearing room on Capitol Hill, cameras lined up like soldiers at attention. She wore her dress uniform one final time. 3 stars, full ribbons. And she told the same story she told at trial. But this time, she wasn't speaking for herself. I am not here because of what happened to me. I am here because of what happens every day to people who don't have my rank, my resources, or my platform. The stop I experienced was not unusual. The only unusual thing was that it happened to someone the system couldn't ignore. The testimony was broadcast live, 15 million views in 48 hours. 1 year after the incident on Route 33, Faith Anderson retired from the United States Army. On her own terms, on her own timeline. At her retirement ceremony, the Secretary of the Army stood at the podium and said, "Lieutenant General Anderson served this nation in uniform and out of it. And when the country she protected failed to protect her, she turned that failure into a force for change."
The room stood. Every officer, every enlisted soldier, every civilian in attendance, standing ovation, 2 full minutes. As for Derek Lawson, he served his 36 months, filed one appeal, denied. His personnel file became a case study in law enforcement academies across Virginia. Recruits read it in their first week, a reminder that a badge is not a license, and power without accountability always has an expiration date.
Because the real question was never whether Faith Anderson got justice. The real question is, what about the ones who don't have 3 stars on their shoulders? Who speaks for them? Maybe that's you. Maybe it starts right here. Man, this story's fiction. But imagine that's your mom on that hood. Your sister in that hot car. Still feel like just a story? Yeah, I ain't stopping.